Welcome into Other People's Shoes. I'm your host, Neil. And I gotta be honest with you, sometimes we encounter somebody in our life that completely derails our train of thought. I don't know if you've ever encountered that person, but today my guest, Cody, has done exactly that. Cody has a very powerful story, a very passionate story, and that will definitely come out in this episode about how he grew up in the church and why he wants nothing to do with church anymore. Cody is going to just blow your mind with his thoughts, his feelings, and definitely his perspective. I hope you're ready, because you know I am. Here we go.
Hey, come take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. I am your host, Neil, and today I get the privilege of sitting with Cody. Cody, can you hear the airplane? Because I can too.
Yeah, it's very loud.
Very loud. We are on our second episode, I'll say taping episode at least, from the balcony of the fourth floor of the company that I work for. And Cody, you can actually share what company you work for. I tend to not share who I work for just because I like to keep it as a shroud of mystery almost.
You know, let me tell you this. Considering we have the same employer, technically,
We do.
I'll keep the mystery alive.
You'll keep the mystery going.
Yeah, I will keep the mystery going.
But you are drinking out of one of my favorite places to go get a cup of coffee, and that is Starbucks.
It is, yeah.
So we'll just leave that at that. Cody, thanks for coming on today. Now, I would say we are definitely in an acquaintance category. My wife always makes fun of me. There's a mention about the fact that I always have friends on, and I always try to preface the relationship but I think that to me that's important.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're acquaintances.
Okay.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Like we're
to
not
say.
best friends. We're not
No,
following
it's
each other
not
on Instagram. We're not Snapchatting each
It's
other.
not a bad thing.
No.
I think acquaintanceships
Okay.
are good.
All right. She always gives me a bad time about
No.
the fact that I always have to preface the show with how I know this person, and I don't know why, but
No, I think it makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
It makes it sound like you know them versus, I just put you off the street.
Right.
You know?
Right. I didn't just pull you off the street, right? Okay. See, I say that. I say, there we go. Anyway, so Cody, I always like to lead off a show with just kind of some nonsense. So here's the nonsense. We'll get the nonsense out of the way, and then we'll get into some deeper stuff, hopefully. The nonsense question, again, that I lead shows off with is this: what size shoe do you wear?
Okay, so that depends on the brand. All right.
And that's good. That's the next question.
So
shoe size and brand, I guess I should lead with.
Okay.
So we'll go with that.
My shoe size is a 9, between 9 and a 10, depending on the brand. The brand I wear the most is Clark's. I wear nothing but Clark's leather boots about once a year. Even I'll buy a new pair, whether I really need them or not, because they last a long time. I have gotten shoes from Doc Martens or other off brands, and I seem to be a size bigger in those. So Clark's is definitely my preferred brand of shoe.
Clark's is the preferred brand of shoe.
Yeah.
The reason why I say that is because we're in your shoes today. As catchy as that is, because
I didn't
other
catch on to that. I didn't
people's
catch on to
shoes,
that.
I know, when
Yeah.
I have to explain the joke, it's not as funny. But anyway.
It was good, though. So today you're in my size 9.
Yeah, exactly.
Chestnut brown leather Clark's.
I love the fact that you threw out the color, too.
I had some very important chestnut.
Some visual imagery there. Yeah. Okay. So, Cody, help me out. You and I have known each other a little while now. I would say probably about a year now, roughly. Okay.
Yeah, I'd say so.
We see each other quite daily.
Often.
All right. So during our many interactions with each other, we always seem to center around this idea of church.
Yeah.
We do always seem to come back to that.
I never even try to make it
Right.
that way. It just kind of
It just kind of, yeah, it really does. It's
Yeah.
not like I'm trying to evangelize to you or secretly get you to come to my church or anything like that, even though I would love, just
Sure.
foreshadowing maybe, love for you to come. But I say all that because when I started thinking about doing these podcast episodes of people in church or why they left church, you really did pop into my head because I've heard
I didn't know that.
through the rumor mill that you have a church story.
I do have a church story.
And so, as you know, being a former podcaster or current podcaster, you are always trying, and we kind of talked about this pre-show, always trying to find a person to be on, and the challenge of that.
It can be really hard.
You can relate on that as a show host.
Yeah, I can. I mean, so for those of you who are listening, I co-host a podcast called The Philosophy Of with my good friend Evan Johnson, and we haven't done anything in a while, so it's okay. So it's busy schedules. But anyway, the point is our whole podcast was about philosophy and history and taking philosophical concepts and applying them to modern day, whatever. But the hardest part for us was, I think, finding topics that were manageable to research and to record about, which is really difficult. And just finding people that we could bring on to talk to, and because the whole premise of it was, okay, we're going to talk about, one episode was the philosophy of artificial intelligence. We dove into that, but it was hard to find someone who works in that field or someone who's acquainted with that concept or that idea in order to bring on. So sometimes we had guests, sometimes we didn't. So it can be really challenging, especially if you want to do a particular topic. Sometimes you can't because you may not know someone who fits that mold perfectly.
I would agree with everything you said. And you said it way better than I think I ever could. Just for the record, little compliment there.
Thank you.
But I mean that, and when I say that, because we had a guest on, Kelly, she was on, and she actually talked about kind of how you met and your story, and she said, she was one of really the second person I've had on that says, you need to go talk to this person.
Someone else said that?
Well, as far as like I've had other guests come on. No. Yeah, I've had other guests come on who said, "Hey, you need to go talk to that person." But she did say that I needed to hear from you on this specific topic. So, with that, I am going to turn it over to you. Tell us, maybe in a nutshell or a vacuum. That seems to be a little fun catchword nowadays.
Okay.
But your church story. Are you a church kid? Were you not? And then kind of how that happened, and then. How did you then end up leaving?
Okay. First of all, I've known Kelly for a few years now. I think 5 years now. And when we met, it was a very interesting time for me because I was still in church and I had just come out of something else, which I'll touch on. But we became friends at a very interesting point in my own walk and with the church. So to give a little bit of background, I was raised, and I'm not going to hide the name of it, but I was raised in the Pentecostal Church of God, or PCG, which is a very fundamentalist, Holy Spirit-driven, tongue-speaking church. My mother, so it's kind of interesting. So growing up, my dad was not a Christian or a believer or anything like that, but my mother was. My dad came from a Christian home but didn't practice himself. My mom came from a Christian home. My grandpa was involved in ministry. He served on a church board. My great-grandpa was a pastor. So that was very much a part of our family.
So a lot of church lineage there.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
It even goes back even
okay.
further.
All right.
Much
Wow.
further.
All right.
So I came from that type of family. And so growing up, I went to church with my mother and my grandparents. They kept me in church. So I did, the typical Sunday school thing. I was dedicated and baptized when I was born, things like that. So I spent the first, I would say first 12 years in the Pentecostal church, just learning all about the denomination, the theology, going to camps every summer, getting involved where I could. And then when I turned 15, I was at a church camp, and I was trying to figure out, it's kind of crazy. This is like, I don't really, for the record, I respect people who believe that God gives people a word of knowledge. I, for one, don't necessarily believe that's happened to me too often. But I will say there was one instance when I was 15 years old. I spent like the whole, first year of high school just trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do with my life? What am I supposed to do? What's my purpose? Do I have a purpose at all? Is that something given to me? Is it something I create for myself? And I remember just asking that question over and over and over again, like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? And I never told anyone that. And that following year, between my freshman and sophomore years of high school, I just didn't feel like going to church camp. I'd gone every year and just didn't want to go. And my late grandfather, Gary, I was over at my grandparents' house, and he kind of sat me down. He's like, hey, the Lord revealed to me that you've been trying to figure out what your plan is for your life and things like that, which to me, and as I'll get a little bit in my story, I may not be in church, but I still acknowledge the higher power. And this is one of the reasons why, is because there's no way he would have known that without any prior knowledge. And so he's like, I encourage you to go to this camp. And, if you just truly surrender yourself to God, God will reveal his plan for you. So I was like, at this point, I'm like, well, okay, I might as well give it a shot. So I went to that camp that year, and like the first, it's like 5 days long. The first 3 days I did not participate. I was too scared. I was like, man, like if I do this and this is it, like I have to make a decision now. And so it was around the third night, I saw everyone, getting getting prayed over, things like that. People seemed to be really getting things out of it. So I finally told myself, all right, what do I have to lose? So I remember going down to the altar, getting prayed over, and I didn't know what to say, because I remember accepting the Lord when I was younger, much younger. But when you're raised in it, it's just kind of the motions of it all. And so I didn't really know what I was believing in. But I kind of made that kind of declaration of my faith at that time, and was like, all right, God, like I don't know what I'm doing, but I give you my good, my bad, my doubts, my strengths, my weaknesses. Use them for what you see fit, or how you see fit. And this was one of the only times I feel like I ever got like a vision from God. But I just remember just the Lord speaking to me and showing me and telling me that I was called to be a leader and be involved in ministry, and to be involved in music and all these other things. So I went home at the end of that week and picked up a guitar that I got for my 13th birthday, never touched. And within a matter of about a month or so, I learned the basic stuff and started playing worship. So I played worship from 14 or 15 all the way up until I left the church when I was 24. Yeah, so I played worship that whole time. And in the meantime, in high school, I got involved in a Bible study from a local church. I got asked to lead it, and so I did that my senior year and taught a Bible study. I did young adult ministry at my church. I also did adult ministry on Wednesdays, where I would do lessons and preach. I did some Sunday nights, did some youth conferences, played music, did all that stuff. And after high school, I got really involved. I wanted to become a youth pastor and a worship leader and all of that. So I went to my denomination's Bible college in Joplin, Missouri. And I spent a couple years in there. And I feel like that was a very pinnacle moment for my life, because up until that point, I didn't really question much. I just kind of accepted what was told to me. And I think no matter what, and for the record, everything I'm saying is from my experience and my opinion, doesn't necessarily make it truth. But from what I've experienced, there, at least in my denomination, there wasn't a lot of room for questioning. You didn't question your leaders. You didn't question the Bible. They were very King James driven type of church. You didn't question anything. And if you questioned something, then it was more, you were kind of looked down upon, and some people might doubt your commitment to Christ and things like that. So I rarely felt okay to ask questions. And when I would ask questions, it was often kind of shrugged off, or just kind of like, all right, we don't ask those questions, So it wasn't until I went to Bible college and started seeing some things, because the college I went to, as I said, was it was the school of my denomination. So it was at their national headquarters, and the denomination I used to serve in was national and international. So this was like a school where you went to basically be taught by like the national youth director, the bishop, the top dogs of the denomination. And when I was there, I just started seeing some things I just couldn't be a part of. I saw some abuses of leadership. I could give plenty of examples of that. But I saw abuses of leadership. I learned about some illegal things that were going on, things that I honestly couldn't be a part of. And that started causing a lot of doubt for me. And I saw the way that, it became very dogmatic, very fundamentalist, very legalistic. And I think fundamentalism and legalism, they have their roles, and done correctly and done with the right amount is a good thing. But when people start using their authority in wrong ways, I think that can be a problem. So I spent 2 years over there, and I struggled a lot. I started becoming more reclusive, and I just felt like I didn't belong there. And when I would try and talk to some of the leaders, like, hey, I know this is going on, or I'd ask them, why'd you do that? Or, it was like, you don't question your leaders. These people are placed by God, so just trust it. And it's so funny sometimes, I think, and it's also kind of sad when you meet a group of people who seem to be, and I don't even think they do this on purpose, but in my denomination, it seemed like oftentimes they would start worshiping their leaders more than God. And so they would take their leader's word as biblical truth versus God's truth. And so that is when you play a dangerous game, I think. And I think that's when things kind of get out of hand. And I just saw too much of that. I'll give you an example. We were at our national conference one summer, which is where every district of the denomination from across the country comes and they vote. It's a very diplomatic type of democratic denomination. So everything is put up to a vote, majority rules. However, the bishop has the final say. So even if the majority says no on something, he could still say yes. And I remember at the time they were trying to figure out whether or not they wanted to move the college to a different state. And it was pretty unanimous that the bishops of the different denominations did not want that. They couldn't afford it financially, all these things. And I remember the bishop looked at everyone and was like, listen, I know how you feel, but I have the final say. So what I say is what God wants. And to me, I kind of thought that was a little... I remember sitting back, because I was doing audio and things for that conference, and I remember sitting back going, wow, that's bad. Like, this is bad. This is a huge red flag for me. When someone, and it's hard too, because I feel like in some denominations there's not enough leadership structure, so I feel like people don't know how to question leaders properly. But that was a moment where I was like, wow, I can't be under this guy, and I can't be in this. And sure enough, he had the final say, and they did it anyway. And it's just interesting. So when I just, from all that and just issues I had just with, I'd be in a class, a theology class, and, they would ask us, questions like, here's one. In my theology class, they made us sit down and talk about whether or not God can die, right? Because if Jesus died on the cross, then did God really die? Just simple things like that. But it would often turn into these debates where people would, it was just weird. It felt very one-sided debates where they take a theological concept and expect you to give the answer that the denomination accepted. So it was kind of like tricking you into thinking you were having a debate, but it was at the end of the day, it was what they said. And for me, I just saw too much corruption and saw too much that I couldn't be a part of it. I just couldn't, with a clear conscience, I couldn't be a part of it.
So you come back from Missouri,
yeah,
right? And you start taking classes at Pacific Bible?
Yeah, I started going to Pacific Bible College here in the Valley. And it's funny because I ended up there because I felt like I still needed to be in a Bible college. And they're non-denominational, at least at the time they were. I think they still are. And I just wanted a place that would allow me to kind of explore different theologies within the Christian realm, to kind of see what I felt that God would speak to me the most with. So I did that for a couple of years, and it's interesting. I randomly took a philosophy class there, which was a worldview in philosophy, and it discussed the different Christian worldviews and the different major philosophies of Rome and things like that. And that's kind of what started getting my noggin, my brain going, okay. That's when I really started questioning everything. That's when I really was like, okay, well, up until that point, I was raised to believe you don't question. Questioning can send you to hell, kind of type of thing. Hell was a very big iron fist. You do something wrong, hell. So I thought I was committing blasphemy by even questioning things like that. But when I was at PBC, it was a great place, and I left not because of any discrepancies or any bad blood. I just left because I felt like at that point I had been in Bible college for 4 years, and I just felt like it had served its purpose for me. And I felt like it had opened the door that I needed to go through for the next phase in my adult life. And, I can honestly say that place, I still have a lot of respect for, and I hope they do great. But yeah, Pacific Bible, I went there for a couple of years. So that would have brought me up until about 2014, 2015. And then I got involved in a non-denominational church because I left the Pentecostal church when I came back entirely. I served for about a year, and then I just left. So then I started serving in a non-denominational church in 2014 and did worship. I was a small group leader, so I teach youth, do youth camps, pretty much everything I was doing in the PCG, but a little bit different. And there was, I won't name the church, but during that time, there was a lot of infighting amongst the leadership, and a lot of stuff went down. I entered that church right when a huge event, a huge change happened. So unfortunately, that led to a lot of bad blood, which poured into the politics of it, which poured into the teachings. Their teachings seemed to focus on this person and what they did wrong, and it just seemed like they lost the whole focus of Christ, right? So I served in that church for a couple of years, and the reason why I chose to leave that church was for a few reasons. One was just all the infighting. It was just too much. And two, there was a point where it split the church apart to where a lot of people were leaving. I was a part of a youth leadership team. I think about 15 leaders, and it was reduced down to maybe 2 or 3 of us. And so I was taking on a lot. I was teaching and playing music and leading worship. And I think the whole 2 years I was there, I think I spent less than a dozen times in the congregation myself being fed and being taught spiritually. So that was a huge issue. And when I brought it up to them, I was like, hey, I need a break. They never gave it to me. And so finally I just decided I got burnt out and I didn't enjoy it anymore. And I didn't even feel like I believed in most of that stuff anymore. So I had to be honest before myself and before God and just be like, I can't do this. The best thing for me to do is to step down, because I felt fake. I felt like I was just faking it, but I wasn't making it.
Wow.
Yeah, and then so I left the church, and then it's just been, I've never gone back.
You've never gone back since that last
so
non-denominational church.
So
okay.
I haven't been to church in 4 years now.
So what year was that you left that church?
2000. Actually, it was 2015.
2015.
So I've
okay.
been to church since then.
So 4 years now.
Yeah.
You've been kind of just, I'm done.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Cody, I'm curious. You mentioned, you mentioned at one point accepting Jesus in your heart. The sinner's prayer. I mean, that's the church term, church wording,
the Romans
whatever.
Road type of thing.
Yeah, type of thing. Yeah. So you did make a commitment to have Jesus as your Lord and Savior.
I did
at one point in time. Okay. So would you consider yourself a believer? I really don't like to use the word Christian because it really only appears 3 times in Scripture.
Sure.
As you know, being a church kid.
It's Christ follower anyway. So
right.
That's the concept.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it.
But would you consider yourself more of a disciple of Jesus?
No.
Okay. Why not?
Well, okay, let's pose. This is where I feel like this gets kind of maybe confusing, contradictory even. So this is great, I guess, for this.
Right. No, it's good. Let's go.
It's interesting because I would not consider myself a believer in the church. So I acknowledge, see, this is going to get interesting, so bear with me. Okay?
That's okay. We got time.
When I left the church originally, I never doubted my salvation right away because I had figured, after everything I'd been through, had I not had a genuine belief in Christ, then I would have just left completely and left him behind, right? But over the years, and just kind of, since I'm a history major studying history, getting more into philosophy and even just different belief systems of the world, I kind of got to the point where I believe in God, but I don't necessarily believe the version of God I was given. So as far as whether or not I believe in God, I acknowledge Christ in his divinity still, and the fact that he is the Son of God and died on the cross for me, but I'm not a disciple of Christ because I don't read my Bible, I don't pray, I don't do anything like that. And it's not like I just pulled the pin and went, I'm going to be a sinner and just do whatever the heck I want, because I don't do that. However, I think if I were to die right now we're getting really existential, I definitely don't think I'd go to heaven because I don't want anything to do with ministry. I don't want anything to do with the church. I don't want anything to do with the Bible. I don't want anything to do with anything like that. And my reasons are and I know for some people these are going to sound like excuses, and maybe they are. Maybe they are. I have to acknowledge that maybe they are. But from, a historical standpoint, and this is going to bring up an interesting point, the church as a whole has oftentimes, or the leaders of the church, that's a better way to put it, the leaders of the church, Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, whatever, have usually abused their power for their own gain. And it's always been a bitter pill for me to swallow. Now, I know that Protestants are a whole different group, but you have to acknowledge that whether you're Protestant or not, that is a part of the church history. You can't just throw that out and just say, well, we're Protestants, so that never happened. And I think I had major issues with the canonization of Scripture, how it was formed, what if you study the canonization, the Council of Nicaea, all these things, you'll see a history of where the books in the Bible we have don't necessarily reflect what they originally had. So there's some books that were accepted as canon and then taken out a couple centuries later. So that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Kind of like, well, who are we to decide what, if it was canonized at one point and then taken out? That's just always kind of bugged me. So
does it kind of go back to that mindset of the leader kind of having the ultimate say rather than God having the ultimate say? Is that maybe why it bugged you a little bit?
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
okay.
I'm a huge Emperor Constantine fan.
Right.
He's one of my historical heroes. In fact, I have the Chi-Rho, or Constantine's cross, tattooed on me. So, I very much appreciate what Constantine did, but I feel like with anything, when you're dealing with man, And assuming everyone believes that man is imperfect, you're going to get this stuff, and it's inevitable. Things are going to change, things are going to happen that aren't necessarily good. But I'm the type of person where, and this is selfish, but I sit there and I go, okay, we have free will, we have all these things, but there are times I feel like God should just put his foot down and go, okay, come on, guys, like, enough's enough. Like, you have choice, but this is not how we do it. And what kind of bugs me too is there's so many denominations and so many people who believe that they're truly right with what they do, and maybe certain theological topics aren't detrimental to salvation. You know, some denominations believe in speaking in tongues, some don't, but I don't think that's a detriment to one's salvation. But I think there's just so many different versions of Christianity these days that I'm not willing to bet on any of them, truly. And so when I tried looking for a different church, I'm like, well, I'm not a Baptist, I'm not this, I'm not that. And I know I don't have to fit a particular mold, but it just got too exhausting for me to try and figure it out. And so I don't consider myself a Christian. I know you don't like to use that term, but I don't believe in myself.
It's just so overused.
It is overused, and it's abused a lot.
And it is, and that too, and that's why.
You know, if I'm being honest, I believe in God.
It doesn't offend me, by the way.
No, I mean, yeah.
I mean, you know.
The thing is like, I believe in God. I believe in a higher power, but I don't think that the version of God we have is who God is entirely. You know, how could he be? He's infinite. Like, I believe he loved us and did what he did, but there's, I think, certain layers to him where I think in heaven, you know, I don't think I'm going to go to heaven. I still have doubts about that. But if I do end up making it, then I think there would be different, for lack of a better term, different flavors of Christianity up there. There'd be Baptists and Lutherans and, you know, things like that. So, I don't know. I don't consider myself a Christian. I just don't. And it took me a long time to get comfortable with that idea, because some people in my life are like, well, yeah, you know, you're just being a rebel and you're no better than Lucifer and things like that. And maybe that's true, but I don't see it that way.
Sure.
You know.
So who would you say that Jesus is?
See, this is that important question. If I answer wrong, I'm going to go to hell, right?
No,
no,
I mean,
teasing. I'm sorry. That's a bad joke. Okay.
You're good.
So
No,
it's going to be good. You know, I would say that's a tricky one for me. That's really hard for me to answer.
Okay.
And this is where it gets a little contradictory, because I hesitate to say that he was God, but I hesitate to say that he wasn't. Because if I'm being perfectly honest, I just had this conversation with my grandmother on Easter, by the way, and that was not a very good time to talk. I don't know if I've ever really believed 100% that Christ was God. I think I did at one point, but deep down, if I'm being honest, because here's the thing. When I was in the church and really believing in everything, and when I left, I feel no different spiritually, or even as a person. I don't feel any different. I didn't feel something leave me when I left the church, and that's where I'm like, I kind of confused. Either I never believed at all, or what I believe really doesn't matter all that much. And I'll admit, I've struggled with the idea of, you know, I would say I'm more of an agnostic than a Christian, obviously. But there are some things, because I think my Achilles heel is studying history, because I understand that with myths and with legends and with time, things change, details change. One story might say it was in a church, another story might say it was in a barn, you know, like things like that. And I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. And I think that's the most honest I can be.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to sit here and be like, yeah, you know, Jesus was the Son of God who died for us. I mean, I believe that at one point, and I think part of me still kind of does. But part of me also thinks that it's because I was raised to believe that. So how much of that is, you know, because I was raised that way, and how much of it is, you know, I don't know. It's just weird. I don't feel a conviction. I don't feel, you know, maybe as the Bible says that, you know, my conscience has been seared with a hot iron, maybe, I don't know. But I don't feel any different outside of the church than when I was in the church. I don't, you know.
What do you think the major thing the church is missing today in your mind? What is one of the major things?
I think for me I think they're missing a lot of genuine teaching. We get caught up in these trends in the church, at least when I was in the church, and I don't think much has really changed. Like, I can kind of think of this new kind of millennial movement that's going on, where church seems to be more about your name brand and how many followers you have on Instagram. I can think of a local church, which I won't name, who their pastor is all about that. And yes, it's good to have a social media presence, but this person in particular kind of makes a fool out of himself. And I think a lot of people, at least who aren't a part of that group, look and go, you're doing this Christian thing the whole wrong way. I just feel like one, I think genuine teachings is missing. We either caught up in money, prosperity. We get caught up in always being happy all the time. This feel-good message that tells you you're a sinner saved by grace, so your struggles, you don't really have to change that much. And I think scripturally, you are saved by grace, but you have to work at it. It's not just something you are just given and you can do whatever you want. So I think it's missing this kind of genuine teaching where it's like, a lot of pastors try and sugarcoat things. I mean, tough stuff is rough, but there's God. Yeah, that's true. But what about the people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts? Or what about people who are struggling with addictions, who marriages are breaking? That's not enough for them to get help. That's just a starting point. And I think that there's a lot of, honestly, this is cocky, but I feel like if I got back in church and preached, it would not be hard. Because I'll admit, when I used to teach lessons, I can't believe I'm going to admit this, but I knew what to say and how to say it. It's not hard to get people to believe in something. It's not hard to get people to agree with you. You just have to give them hope, and you have to give them the illusion of hope at times just to get them to follow you. And so I think that if the church kind of redesigned itself, I guess, I think the things that would help it is be more real, be more genuine. There's an emphasis on being genuine, but yet there's not a lot of genuine things going on. How many times do you go to a church and you meet someone new, and yeah, there are genuine people there who will greet them, but then there's also those fake people who are doing it because it's expected of them. Hey, how's it going? It's hard for me because I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because there are good, genuine Christian people out there, but the church I feel like is lost. The genuine, like let's get through life together, not this whole, I don't know how to, I know I'm not describing it well, but it's just, I feel like it's very disgenuine a lot of the times,
I think you're describing it the way you want to describe it, right? So you don't have to worry about that. But my question too, Cody, is this idea that you had it. Mm-hmm. You were pretty elevated from your own description, right? And then all of a sudden, something happens, and then you're like, you know what? I'm gone. I want to almost go. Was there a moment? Was there a timeline? Was there a series of events, or was it an exact moment where you're like, you know what, I can't do it anymore?
I think yeah, because I was trying to be as brief as I could with everything, for time, but there were definitely events that led me to this point. And in fact, it took me a lot of the stuff I went through in the last year before I finally was like, I don't believe in this. And maybe it's a little bit selfish, because I've never looked at God as being my end-all be-all answer. Even when I was committed to the faith, I always knew that, yeah, sure, God can do whatever he wants, but there's also a part of me that has to put in the work, and part of me that, I believe God, or whatever you want to believe in, created humans to be, we have the ability to think and to problem solve. So sometimes I think people rely too much on God when he's already given you the ability to figure out your problems. And so I kind of got to the point where I'm like, okay, there are some things I think God should intervene in, and some things I don't think he should intervene in. And for me, there was just so many different life events in the last few years where I look back and I'm like, okay, and this is going to sound selfish, right? And this is going to sound very works-based, but then again, I was raised in a very works-based denomination, so to kind of give you a filter. But I would say I was very committed. I sacrificed a lot of time, energy, money to my denomination and really dug in and did all these things, and I don't feel like I got anything out of it, anything good out of it. I got more frustration, and maybe I was looking towards the wrong thing, because I knew as far as God was concerned, I was doing the right thing. I was getting involved. That's all I needed to do as far as he was concerned, in my mind. But looking back, and this was a hard thing for me to accept, but I feel like I've gained more out of the church than I ever did when I was in the church. And so I kind of did this whole kind of pros and cons list and kind of wrote down, like, this is what I've gained outside of the church, this is what I've gained in the church. And my list was bigger with what I gained without it, because there's a lot of things that I experienced when I left the church that I was taught that were taboos or bad and evil things that I had experienced that actually made me a better person. So,
do you have an example of those?
Well, first of all, my denomination was very against learning about philosophy or anything else that wasn't King James Bible, right? So when I started learning, when I got out of the church, I started with the basics. Now, I will admit I am not a philosophy expert. I'm not going to say I know everything, because I don't think anyone really does. But it opened my eyes a lot. So I started with the kind of classic philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, things like that. And moved on from, Platonism to Stoicism to all these different ideas, and I was learning that a lot of them, especially Stoicism, the whole premise of Stoicism is that there are things you can control and there are things you can't. And the thing is to learn the difference between the two and see challenges as ways to temper you, to make you stronger and not necessarily to harm you. And I know Christianity has a little bit of that flavor into it. But I will tell you that, to get really personal if I can, I did not drink alcohol, period, when I was in the church. I was out of the church when I had my first drink. Now, I don't go out and I don't get drunk. Have I been drunk before? Yeah. But it's not something I try to do. But the time that happened, I was like, oh man, I should have watched it. But I didn't do anything regrettable. But I was like, man, I don't feel guilty. Like, how is this? Because I think it's one of those moderation things, right? Or choosing to go to a secular school was a huge thing for me. Being raised that that's not good. You don't want to be educated by the world. Going and doing that and maintaining a solid GPA and getting scholarship money and being a part of an academic journal and all these things, those things weren't bad for me. And, or even just, I was in a relationship where I lived with my partner and all of these things, and I learned a lot from that. And I think that those are those experiences that I would have never been able to have and to make me a better version of myself had I been in the church. Because I think the church, it does good in, warning people like, hey, this is why you shouldn't be doing this stuff. But sometimes they take things that the Bible doesn't necessarily say don't do, and they throw it in and be like, this is biblical truth. So like for me, just going through a relationship, being engaged, living with my partner, her and I split, that was devastating for me. Having things go on with my family, finding out I had a half-sister that everyone else knew about but me, and just, dealing with family situations, personal situations, hit with what felt like one trouble after the next. And there was a time where I thought that maybe this was a punishment for me leaving the church. All of these things I've been going through since I left, it seems like I can't catch a break sometimes. And, that's just life, really. But, there were times where, man, maybe this is God's way of trying to get me back. And then I just kind of thought, well, I was having similar situations even in the church. So after all these events, maybe it was a lack of faith on my part, maybe. But I sat there and I was like, all right, I don't feel any different outside the church than I did in the church. So either A, I was never saved, or B, it doesn't matter if I'm in the church or not. And I've been through all these life experiences that I can honestly look in the mirror and go, I'm okay with who I am. Not just okay, but I'm happy with who I am as a person. And I just don't think I would have ever have gotten to that point had I not left the church.
So Cody, where does your authority come from?
My authority? Are we talking morals, ethics, things like that? My authority?
Sure. I'm going to let you interpret that however you want.
My authority. See, that's a funny question, because the right answer would be the Bible. But
well, that's the Sunday school answer, right?
For me,
it's
not.
Jesus.
I will say that there are.
But what's Cody's answer?
Are we looking for what? Do I have a manual of life?
No, I mean who gets to have the ultimate say in your life? Who is the authority in your life?
Me. I do. I would say. I mean,
and that's okay.
My own choices, and it's not.
I mean, that's okay that you have that.
Yeah,
I'm not saying we're endorsing.
Well, yeah, I know. This is a very unpopular opinion amongst your listeners. I already know that.
I don't know who my listeners are, to be honest with you. I really don't. I mean, there's been 11 downloads and
Christians left that are going to be like,
maybe.
oh my God, this person's horrible. Oh, I'm going to.
We need to pray for him more.
No, save it. Trust me. No, there are things that I base my life around, right, that I put in place of the Bible, I'll say. But my authority comes from myself. I make my own choices. I suffer my own consequences for those choices at times. But ultimately, I've come to the realization that there is no fate other than what I make for myself. There is no destiny other than what I make. So everything is up to me. And what's weird is, for some people, that seems like, well, why would you ever want to do that? Like, God could do all that for you. And I think there's more, I appreciate things more that I'm the one calling the shots. And I always found it quite stressful when I was in church, because it'd be like, man, if I'm going to make this decision, I got to pray about it, I got to fast about it before I even make a move. And half the time I'd miss out on great opportunities because I never got an answer, So, I'm not afraid to say, and I stand by every word I say, even until, judgment, if that's what I have to face one day. But, I'm my own authority,
Do you feel like any leaders let you down in any way?
For sure. And I think that definitely played a role.
How did they let you down, do you feel like?
Well, there was one in particular I can think of who knew.
I mean, obviously, you can list names if you want, but
no, I'd
not
rather
necessary.
Not, honestly.
Yeah.
As rightfully so, I have some people. I shouldn't even have named the denomination. I'm cool with it being in here, but if anyone ever hears it, they're going to be mad at me. But there's.
Well, if they're true believers, right, they'll forgive you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right.
They probably need it more than I do at this point. Judgment. Ouch. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I mean, okay, here's a crazy situation. I have a family member who went through demonic possession when I was younger. I was 12 years old, and I was there when they got the demons exorcised from them. And there's a lot of stuff that went down with that to this day I'm like, I don't really know what to think on any of that.
Right.
But this person accepted Christ, turned their whole life around, did a whole 180, and then the church wouldn't let him get involved or do anything like that because of what he had been through. Because it made him susceptible to what if you revert back, were the exact words. What if you revert back, then that's a danger to the congregation. And I always thought that was kind of messed up.
Sure.
Because it's like, okay, if you really, well then I have to ask, then did you really do anything? Because why would there be any... I mean, whether someone deals with drug addiction or demonic possession, they're still just as much of a threat as the other. So it's like, I don't know, that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Sure.
And then he was asked not to come back. And then this person actually ended up just leaving the church as a whole because of that. So it was kind of pointless deliverance, really, I guess, if you want to think of it that way.
So I read this book a couple of months ago. It's called You Lost Me. It's actually what sparked these series of season, we'll say, that we're in now, that my show's in now. And the Barna Research Group, I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they're a Christian organization. They did a ton of research on why people leave church, and then they threw it in a book and had all kinds of stats and statistics, and it's a good read. Yeah. I mean, I know you're kind of a reader.
Well, I've done my own research too, like especially in my age group in
sure.
particular.
Yeah, there is a huge, almost epidemic.
Yeah,
from church circles.
Yeah.
It's being categorized in a lot of circles as an epidemic. So these are 6 reasons, and I'm curious what you think about them. So here they are. No particular order. Reason number 1, church seems overprotective.
Are they making general, like the church as a
I think
whole,
this is
or
just
like
a generalized,
okay.
These are all generalized statements. Let me be clear on that. It's not specific to one denomination or another or whatever.
Well, what I think about that is maybe for some denominations, mine was.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that every denomination is overprotective. I think what that comes down to even is just their parents, really, because their parents are the ones setting up the house rules. So, I mean, I would say that's maybe like...
But would you think churches in general are seem overprotective to you? Again, we're going 4 years ago when you left. And maybe even when you grew up.
See, I'm kind of in the middle on that one.
Okay.
Because I would say yes and no.
And that's fair.
Honestly.
And that's okay. That's okay. These are your answers, not mine.
Need to be more protective of
right.
the congregation.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think it's kind of 50-50.
Okay, 50-50 on you. Okay. All right. Reason number 2. Teens and 20-somethings' experience of Christianity is shallow. Teens and 20-somethings' experience of Christianity is shallow.
Like, I'm going to go ahead and interpret that as they mean there's not much depth for them at that age group, because I would definitely agree. Because at least in some of the, and with respect, with some of the older generational driven churches where there's a lot of people from the boomer age leading the church, I would say that's very true, because I was a part of a few churches growing up in my denomination where they just didn't know what they were doing with their youth or their young adults, and then they would put people who were their age group trying to teach them, and it's kind of hard to teach people things from a different generation because we're all products of our generation. How we view scripture can be based on our generation. So I would say that's pretty true, honestly.
Okay.
There's not much for a lot of them to do.
Yeah. All right. Churches today come across antagonistic towards science.
Yes and no. I think science too. I like science. I think science has a lot of truth to it, but I also understand the dangers of science. So I think it depends. I think if a church is being challenged in something that science can back up, there's this whole idea in the church that the science is never right. It's always wrong. It's always wrong. It's never right. But there are times where it's like you can't really argue with it, and I often find that, and when those instances, people get really into it, like they get crazy. So I would say, for some, yeah, especially, I mean, I'm not going to go into this, but especially when you get into topics of abortion or gene editing or anything like that, people go crazy over that. So I would say, yeah, generally speaking, from my experience, churches and science don't mix very well.
Okay. Reason number 4, young Christians' church experience related to sexuality are often simplistic and judgmental. I read that kind of choppy. I'll try that one more time. Young Christians' church experience related to sexuality are often simplistic and judgmental.
You know, it's funny because I've thought about this kind of stuff a lot. Because growing up, I knew actually one of my best friends growing up, whose family was very involved in church. He came out as gay, and that didn't end well for him, unfortunately. But I think,
was he ostracized or
very much so?
Okay.
Yeah, and even his family had to kind of suffer a little bit for that one. Because it was the whole kind of idea of you can't lead your home, you can't be a part. Yeah, whatever.
Gotcha.
But I would think so because, in my opinion, there's really no. See, that's still a hot topic for me. Like, kind of something I don't know really where I stand, other than the fact that, like, whether you agree with it or not, there are gay teens in your youth, or people who are struggling with sexual identity issues in your youth. It's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen, I think, forever. And I don't necessarily think the church really knows how to handle that very well, other than it's against because think about it, whether the church believes it's wrong or not, think about it, you're dealing with a kid with emotions and feelings, and you want to be like, you're going to go to hell for that. That, I think I've known people who have really struggled and had to do therapy for that kind of stuff because of those experiences really hurt them. So I feel like the church needs to find a better way to deal with that instead of just going straight for the jugular and be like, you're gay, you're going to hell. So I would say, they're definitely judgmental towards that.
Okay. Reason number 5, they wrestle with the exclusive nature of Christianity.
Exclusive nature.
Well, I quote often, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Okay, that's what I thought you were going with.
Yep,
Because of the
that's
word
exactly
exclusive, and I
right.
was like,
Yeah,
what?
that's the verse that pops into my head, at least, because of this idea that, again, it's pretty exclusive. Jesus himself says it, so it's pretty exclusive to me, but how do you interpret that?
Well, I don't think that's what Jesus was saying, personally.
What was he saying then?
Jesus was just clearly saying, as far as salvation, because of the
right.
shroud,
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like in the Old Testament,
Yep.
sacrifices were how you broke the space between you and God to communicate with the
Right.
priest, and through him you no longer need it. That's what I would say from a theological perspective. But I would
Text
say,
in context, somebody once said, didn't
right. So, but I would say that at least around here in some churches, it's very like exclusive and hip and cool, and you know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I was going.
Almost
to,
like a
where,
Costco kind of thing.
Kinda, and if you're not a part of a certain group,
Okay.
then you have a hard time fitting in. I think that part's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Reason number 6, church feels, and this is right again with what you were saying. That's why I loved some of the stuff you were saying. Church feels unfriendly to those who doubt.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, personal experience. I can't be the only one who's ever felt that way, clearly. So, but yeah, no, I would say so. Because doubting shakes the foundation.
So I want to dig into your story a little bit.
Okay.
So, digging into your story, was there anyone along the way who became a mentor for you or who was pouring into you? The new thing or the new hip thing, at least in my circle of things, is discipling someone. Did anybody come alongside you and disciple you in your mind?
Yeah, I can think of a couple. And the whole discipleship thing these days, I think, is going out of hand, because oftentimes people who disciple really shouldn't be, because they go for the whole Paul and Barnabas, like everyone needs Paul, everyone needs Timothy, everyone needs a Barnabas, and it just gets a little out of hand. It gets really out of hand, because some people don't need to be mentoring people. I'll just say that. Really.
Okay,
truly.
But if they were, I mean...
Sorry, I just went on a tangent.
That's awesome.
But some people don't need to be
awesome.
pouring into other people's lives.
That's
It's
awesome.
true.
Just stop pouring into people.
Sorry.
Stop pouring into
No,
Cody. He
no,
doesn't
no.
want anyone pouring into.
Well, no.
But you know what I mean. But
Yeah,
I mean, I'm asking because growing up for me, I did have a couple of guys that were pouring into me. I did have I was pretty fortunate to have that.
Right.
But I know now that I didn't reciprocate that down the line. And actually that's what led to a lot of this series too, in reading this book, is I felt convicted as a youth leader that I didn't disciple my kids well enough. My kids being my youth kids, to be clear. And so with that, I'm curious, you being the church kid that you were you really, in your mind, discipled?
No, there's one pastor I can think of in particular who was not just a pastor, but he was also a very important father figure for me. I trusted him. I still have a lot of respect for him, honestly. But his name was Pastor Dickey, or Harmon Dickey, and he was my pastor for the last 3 years of high school. And he definitely poured into me, and he would let me come into his office every Sunday. We'd meet an hour before service, and any questions I had, I could ask. They weren't always welcome questions, but he would let me at least ask them. And then he'd come back with like a scripture as to why I was wrong. But that wasn't the point. The point is he gave me an opportunity. Like when I first wanted to do teaching, he told me, well, I'll never forget this. He goes, well, in order to lead, you have to learn how to serve. So he made me for 1 year, every Saturday, clean the entire church. Like mop out the bathrooms, do everything, because he always emphasized that in order to lead, you have to serve. Because being a leader is serving the people. It's not being served by them. So that was a very important lesson that I still carry with me.
That's powerful.
Right, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's something I still carry around with me. Like even with my job now, sometimes I'm like, man, I got to deal with these people. But then I think, yeah, but it's teaching me, got to serve people, whatever. But he was definitely a very important figure to me, and he was definitely responsible for kind of, he also told me too that in life you're going to have difficulties, and it's not necessarily the difficulties that matter, but it's how you handle those difficulties and having faith that things will work out, despite whether or not they happen in the way you want them to. So I definitely learned a lot from him, and I don't talk to him anymore. I haven't spoken to him in years, but probably because I felt a little bit of shame, when I left. But that's a whole nother ball of wax. So yeah, he was definitely a huge mentor.
So maybe reach out to him. Just on a side note.
I don't
just
know.
On a side note.
Yeah, maybe,
side note,
maybe,
that's all.
maybe.
Just side note. I mean, if he was that impactful to you,
yeah,
and that powerful, maybe, because, I don't know about you. I mean, when somebody does something awesome for me, or somebody, has, maybe I've impacted their life, has come back later and said, hey, this moment, this thing that you did, yada, 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 whatever that is, man, that encourages me, hopefully as much as, it encouraged them, to do that. So I don't know, little reciprocation there. So Cody, I want to also challenge you with a statement here that I came across this last couple of weeks or so. And the statement is this, is the first word you think of when you think of your earthly father is the first word you think of when you think of your heavenly father.
Yeah, I disagree with that, though. That's such a psychology thing, Like, I've heard this argument before that how you view your parents is how you view God, because you connect God as a fatherly figure. So whatever you think of your parents,
right?
I've heard all that, but it's weird because I think differently of my father than I would of God.
Okay. So what would your word be?
In the way that you wouldn't expect.
Okay, I'm ready for it. What would your word be, or what would your response be to that?
For my father, the one word I would use to describe him. Let's see. I'm thinking not because I don't have one, but because I want to make sure I pick the right one. But I would say my word for him would be selfless.
Selfless?
Selfless, yeah.
Okay. And, of course, my next question is probably going to be, do you associate that with God?
No, I don't. I've always thought God was kind of selfish, and I always thought he was kind of, I always thought God had kind of a big ego, because, growing up, one thing that was always hard for me to accept is when you see situations in the Old Testament where the Israelites go and invade somewhere, and then God tells them to kill the men, women, children, animals, everything. And I always thought that was, like, kind of messed up. I mean, and I truly think that if people were honest with no judgment, they would admit that's kind of messed up. Now, sure, he had his reasons for it, but it's like, that was too far. You don't need to do that. But I've never thought of God as being, I don't know, I've never viewed God as being all, I don't know, like I used to think in my head, I even told my grandma this one time, I said, I don't want to go to heaven if all we're going to do is worship God all day. That sounds boring. Why would I want to, it's like going to, your boss, for instance. Say you don't have a good boss, and in order to get anywhere... I
have a great boss, just for the record.
Yeah, no. For the record, this boss, I don't know who you are. Maybe I do, but this is not reflecting towards you. But what I'm saying is it reminds me...
In case he or she ever listens, my boss is amazing.
It reminds me of those people who have to kiss their boss's butt in order to get anywhere.
Gotcha.
And it just always... Even when I was a kid, I used to think that.
Okay.
So I don't view God as being very... very selfless or it's a lot. It's about him. It's about, now you could spin it and say everything he's done, he did to bring us salvation, but I don't buy it really. And I just kind of think that that God, let's put it this way. Now, of course, you could throw the theological thing of God is perfect and his ways aren't. That's an easy answer. His way aren't our way. All that kind of basic, stereotypical Christian stuff. But if you think about it, if you believe the fact that there's two sides to every story, then we only know God the way he wants us to see him. So I think that when people get to heaven, if there is a heaven, then, and I still struggle with that idea, honestly, whether or not there's anything after life. But I don't know. I don't think what we've been taught is exactly who he is. It's one-sided. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just my opinion.
Hey,
if you were sitting right here across from me, I'd be like, all right, well, let's have a chat. Show me why I need to be committed to you.
Here's something I need to. Not that I'm closing the show,
no, you're good.
Because I'm not.
Because
but
I feel like I'm making a disaster out of this.
You're fine. You're fine.
I'll never be on here
Because I want you to know this. This is super important for me, and hear me on this.
I know where you're going with this.
Where am I
and
going? Okay. Nope. I'm gonna say this. I say this at the end of every show, so I'm gonna say it pre-ending. I'm not ending, but if I were to end, this is what I would end. It says this: remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really get a different perspective. That is kind of the encompassing of my show.
Yeah, which I would say.
So we're walking in your shoes. We're getting your perspective. It's not mine.
No.
I mean, people can throw rocks and have judgment if they want, but the idea is we're in your shoes. These are your thoughts. These are your feelings. These are your perspectives.
And that's true. And like I often think too that when people want to criticize me for my opinions, they're just showing me more of a reason why I don't want to go back. And like there was this quote, I'll quote you something. Take it for what you will, but I read this quote one time and I thought it was very fitting. And it said, religion to the common is seen as true, to the intellectual seen as false, and to the leader seen as a tool for power. And so it's just kind of, take that as whatever you will. You can take it as religion versus relationship, whatever you want to say. But I always kind of thought that was kind of, Will
you state it again?
Okay.
I want to make sure we're hearing it correctly. So state it one more time for me.
So the quote is, religion to the common is seen as true, to the intellectual is seen as false, and to the leader is seen as a tool for power. So now, in the time that this quote was written, it made perfect sense because most of the population couldn't even read or write, so that makes sense, right? So they just were spoon-fed whatever. But I often think of it as kind of like, no, I'm not saying this is a general statement, but a lot of the times when I come across very religious people, they're not the most rational or critically thinking people that I know personally. Not always, but most of the time they think in this little box, and that's the box they've been given, and they're cool with that till the day they die, and that's fine if that works for them. But I oftentimes really love to be around people who question things. Even if they are in church and they go, well, I don't know if I believe my pastor here, I don't know if I believe the Bible here, then I have more respect for them than people who are just like, oh, well, this is what the Bible says, even though it's been translated more times than I can count, and things have been taken out and added, but I still trust it because it's the message that matters most. And I think that is true to a degree, but I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
I see religion as a good and bad thing. It can be used for good and for bad, no matter who's carrying the banner.
This may come as a shock to you, but I hate religion.
What? I know you're about a relationship.
I am.
It's not religion, it's relationship.
Yeah, I am 100% about that.
Jesus and I are on a break.
Oh.
Probably forever.
I hope not.
You know what's sad is I'm okay with that. Can I get real for a second? Can I get really real?
Get real.
I've been getting real this whole time, but because I know you probably got this agenda on where we need to stop. But
we're good.
You know what's really sad is because I think deep down, I know I'm screwed. Maybe I am wrong, right? I feel like I got a 50-50 shot, right? And I die. I've thought about this a lot. If I die and there's a hell, which knowing my luck there is, there's a hell, and God, I'm going to have to stand before judgment, I'm just going to look at him and be like, listen, you created me with these attributes. I may not have used them correctly. I don't know what you want from me. I did my best. And there's another quote too that I really like that says, if there be a God and he be just, he will not care how devout you are. If there be a God and he not be just, then you shouldn't serve him. And if there is no God, then the only thing you have when you die is the love that you had for your friends and your family. And I've always that's kind of how I center it right now, because I don't know 100% if there's a God or not. I don't, because how much of that is what I was raised with, And that's how I think people don't want to question, because when they start asking that question, then it's like, oh no, I don't know. And then I've had things happen that I can't explain. And so I'm like, I'm on the fence. I don't know. That's me getting real.
I've heard it said the devil owns the fence. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that
see,
helps you any
You know
or
what's
makes
funny
it
is don't even
more
get started
complicated.
about the devil.
Yeah.
Because the devil's such an easy way out of
Yeah.
situations. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
the devil made me do
well, there's
it.
the devil made
then...
me do it, or well, what's funny this is really. I'm gonna leave this. Okay, this is the last kind of mind thing I'll do.
All right.
So I was in one of my Bible classes one time in Joplin, and we were posed the question: did God create evil? And each one of us had to give an answer. Everyone said no, but me. I said yes, because there is a spot in Isaiah, and I should have had this ready, when God talks about He is the creator of light and darkness, good and evil, all that kind of stuff. At least in the I was reading out of a Thompson Chain reference Bible, and it said good and evil were the two words that God had used describing, what He's the creator of. And so I used that right there to say, okay, well, God did create evil. Well, then they asked me, and if you can find that, and if I'm misquoting that, please let me know. But I'm
Googling right now, so keep going.
Also, just make sure you're getting the right, the true translation. No, if you have it.
I do the King James.
Okay, yeah. It's
So
probably King James.
Isaiah 45:7
Okay. I was gonna say 15.
says, well, I'll let you read it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You'll be the reader.
No, I haven't read out of the Bible in so.
I know this is a first for you in
my
like
God.
4 years. I got you to read out of the Bible.
Isaiah
When?
45, verse 7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all things. Okay, so that was the verse where I was like, God creates evil, because it says it right there.
But here's the thing: we would
well,
have to take it in context.
Yeah,
hold on,
but-
though.
No, hold on.
We got to read the whole chapter.
Hold on. Let me
right.
finish. I'm the
All right.
captain now.
All
I'm
right.
the captain for just a second. Can
All
I
right.
finish my story?
Whew.
No, I'm so sorry. That was shadow play right there. No, but listen, I used that and was like, create evil. Now you can go and say, well, the Hebrew word for create is this, and that means this, and that's fine. But if you want to take the Bible as the literal true word of God, which people do all the time, then it's plain as day, right? And so then I started thinking about it, and my teacher was like, well, why do you think that? And I said, well, God created Lucifer with the ability to choose. Knowing that he was going to choose his own way, knowing he was going to rebel, knowing he was going to eventually cause sin to come into the world through, tricking Adam and Eve, all that. I said, well, if God knew all that, and he had a plan to counter that, then what was the point? And then I got the whole, well, God's not his ways aren't our ways, and everything like that. And I thought, well, he did end up creating evil because of that one choice of giving Lucifer free will, which ended up, so it follows this chain of events. So, but I don't see anything wrong with accepting the idea that God is the author of good and evil. I don't see anything wrong with that, but they did, and I got an F on that assignment for everyone who wants to know. But I was like, no, God did create evil. He created something knowing it was going to make a choice, and then people can spin it and say, well, God loved Lucifer so much he gave him free will. But I don't think so. I think it was he gave him free will to eventually have the outcome to where, and this is where I think God's kind of egotistical, in order to have sin come into the world so he can die for us, so we would worship him, because it's our love and adoration for his sacrifice that, it never rubbed me the right way. It never did. And so that's why I was always like, no, he did create evil, because you got to think outside the box, use that brain that God, or the little one cell, if you believe in evolution, which I doubt any of you do, but you know what I mean? Like, you have to think about these things rationally, because sometimes you overthink it or you don't think enough. And for me, it's like, I'm comfortable right now admitting that I don't know what I believe in that, and that I'm just gonna let eternity handle itself, because I'm not there. I might regret this one day, who knows? But I'm not gonna spend my whole life, not doing anything because I'm too scared.
Well, Cody, I think first off, you were very honest.
Yeah, a little too honest. I'm sorry. I really
That's okay.
I'm
No,
actually genuinely sorry.
What are you sorry about?
I'm respectful for other people.
Don't be
sorry.
sorry.
Thinking,
Don't be sorry. No, it's not. It's not.
It's gonna be.
It's not.
I'll understand if you edit the part where I say, I'm the captain now. You're the captain. This is your ship. You can steer it where you want.
Oh man, that's fun. That's good times. Cody, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
We're gonna kind of wrap up with a game. I promised you a game.
Okay.
So it is a die
Ooh.
in a cup
Okay.
of awesome. So you get to roll that, and then based on what you roll, I will ask you a question.
Okay.
And this is a game I like to call Senseless.
Senseless. Okay. Do I do it now?
Yeah, do it now. Absolutely. What'd you get?
A 5.
You got a number 5.
Yeah, hopefully
Okay.
It's a great question.
So hopefully it's a good
It'll be
question.
a
I'm
good
sure.
question.
Hopefully. I mean, I don't know if I've had any good questions today.
No,
but-
you have. Honestly, I've enjoyed this. I'm just
Okay,
afraid that
all
I've
right.
been a little too honest.
Nah, you're
My
good.
shoes have been a little too open.
We're in your shoes.
You are.
We can't
And I need
cry
new
about
ones.
that when we're in your shoes. So, favorite thing to taste?
Favorite thing to taste?
Yeah, because we're dealing with senseless, so it's 5 senses. You know, I feel like I explain the
Favorite
game every
thing-
show.
Yeah,
but-
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
right.
Favorite thing to taste?
yeah,
That's a tough one.
I know. It might be the toughest question you've had to answer all day.
Honestly, yeah, I've had to think about this one the most. My favorite thing to taste would be. Okay, that's tough. I never actually thought about it. Okay, here's the thing. My favorite thing to taste, because I've been on the steak kick lately.
Okay.
Steak like once a week, which is like really bad, but I have been. Is the taste of a nice medium rare butter, garlic, rosemary, and thyme steak that's just perfectly cooked, and it's just so juicy and it melts in your mouth. And it's that kind of like, it's got garlic and butter, and just that's my favorite taste
Wow.
right now. Yeah, I'm quite the cook.
Apparently.
Yeah.
And your imagery is wonderful, by the
Thank
way.
you so much.
It really is.
I want to thank J.R.R. Tolkien, because when I was reading Lord of the Rings and all that when I was younger, I always loved how he described things. That's the truth. That's not even a joke. So
I like it.
I try to be articulate.
Cody, if I was going to leave you with one last thought, it would be this, or one last statement, it would be this. We should never apologize for who we are.
I sound like my therapist.
No, I'm
No,
serious,
no,
though.
I'm serious too. You sound just like my therapist.
Because you really shouldn't apologize for who you
do
are.
all the
Now,
time.
one day, though,
I know.
you might have to apologize for who you are. But
Maybe.
right now, we're
What does
dealing with
that
the
mean?
right.
Do you
I don't
something?
know.
I don't know.
I don't
Is your
know
God
anything.
telling you something? Because
No.
I'd really like to know.
No. No.
Okay. Yeah, well, we all have to answer to it.
You
one
know,
day in
we
some
do.
way.
We do. And we will. And, you know, the thing I would tell you is you were real and you were honest and you were authentic,
Yeah.
which is all the stuff we wanted and we talked about pre-show. So there we go. And it is raining like cats and dogs right now. And it is so cool to sit out and
I've never
see
actually
this.
been up here,
It's pretty cool.
and I'm not cool enough.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So again, I go back to my initial quote. I'm going to read it one more time as I close out the show. I want to thank my guest, Cody, for coming on, being honest, being transparent.
Yes.
Cody, you're awesome.
Thank you.
And you make
Neil.
amazing magic sometimes. And I'm not talking about like rabbits out of a hat. I'm saying there are certain things that you have a quality of. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
That you do a really good job.
Thank you so much.
And I love your smile every time I go down there. So
Thanks. It's kind of crooked, like me. Just kidding.
No,
Just kidding,
That was
everybody.
meant to be sincere.
I'm just kidding.
So just remember this: when we walk in other people's shoes, we really do get a different perspective.